amigos, buenas noches. And I'm afraid that's all the Spanish you're going to get out of me tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here in Mexico, and particularly in this fantastic centre of yours here, which I've had the pleasure of touring earlier on today. I've never been so impressed by anything. It's really fantastic. I've travelled all around the world to many continents and many countries. Never in my life have I experienced the incredible hospitality that I've been greeted with here in Mexico City. I've just been overwhelmed by friendliness and your welcoming attitude, so I'm really grateful. And in particular, I'd like to thank Bernardo, Carol, Andy and Alex, also members of the Executive Committee, Joe, Solomon, Eyal and Amy, and of course Jaime, Esther and Daniel. And in particular I'd like to also thank Daniel for editing that video that you just saw. I'd also like to comment briefly on the young people that are here, and it's very, very pleasing to see so many young members of the New Mexico community, of the Mexico City community. I beg your pardon, I know I'll leave and I'll leave straight away. Because you are the future, you are incredibly important to the continuing support for the State of Israel and, of course, for the IDF. So it's fantastic to see you here. You're, in my opinion, are extremely welcome. I want to start, I've been asked to start actually, ladies and gentlemen, with speaking about my favourite subject, me. And that is, I've been asked to say what qualifies me to speak about this subject, and the title of my talk is Israel, the Country That Keeps the Peace. I've had experience over 30 years of all levels of counter-terrorism and conventional conflict, including in Northern Ireland, in the Balkans, in the Middle East, in the first Gulf conflict in 1991, in the 2013 Iraq War, and in Afghanistan. I faced the same kind of situations as the IDF frequently face when fighting their enemies, wherever they might be, in Israel and in the adjacent nations, including having to deal with the threat, the very real threat of human shields, and what effect that has on military operations, and what you have to do to deal with it to minimize the loss of civilian life while at the same time still destroying the enemy. As a British officer, having fought in different theatres around the world over 30 years, how have I become involved with Israel? Because the British Army has never actually fought alongside the IDF. And I'll explain very briefly. As a junior officer, as an officer cadet at Sandhurst, which is our kind of West Point equivalent, where we learn to be officers, we study the IDF in immense detail. We study their operations, we study their training, we study their techniques, and we learn a great deal about them. And I think it's true to say that every British soldier has immense respect and admiration for the Israel Defence Force, as well as understanding their tactics. They recognise and respect their fighting courage and their expertise in attacking and dealing with an enemy that often outnumbers them. I dealt with members of the IDF at various stages during my career, most particularly in the latter points of my career when I was working in the Prime Minister's office in London. I had close dealings, in particular with Mossad and other Israeli intelligence services, as well as the IDF. And so I've come in that time during my military career to appreciate and to understand the way the IDF works. And since I left the army, I have become even more closely associated with the IDF. I do frequent media commentary on Afghanistan and Iraq and other conflicts, and I was asked once to comment on the IDF's operation in Gaza during Operation Cast Lead back in 2008. And I was on a live interview with the BBC in London, and they asked me what I thought as a professional officer of an army that deliberately targets and kills innocent civilians. And I told them then that that was the furthest thing from the truth, that the Israel Defense Force has taken unprecedented steps, greater than any army in the history of warfare, to save the lives of innocent civilians. Needless to say, the BBC did not invite me back to talk about Israel again. But I do appreciate, very much appreciate, the bravery, the fighting effectiveness, the humanity in war of the Israel Defense Force. And for me, it's an enormous privilege to be here in this room tonight with Lieutenant Colonel Maxime Levy and also Lieutenant Colonel Xavier Rosenfeld, one of whom, Maxime Levy, who you heard from just now, is still an active member of the IDF, and Xavier, who has recently left the IDF. For me, it's an honour and a privilege to be in this room with them both, representative of that fine fighting organisation. You can go to very many countries in the world today where the British Army has intervened one way or another down the centuries. And there are many countries, such as Israel, such as your friends to the north in the United States, who celebrate Independence Day from Britain. Once upon a time, much of the world's surface was painted red, part of the British Empire. And you can travel from the United States to South Africa, from the coast of Chile to northern Russia, from India to China, and you can find places where Britain has been involved in military intervention. And you can even find British military intervention in the history of Mexico. Because, as you possibly don't appreciate, but the United Kingdom was the first European power to recognize Mexico in 1810 when it declared independence. And in the first Franco-Mexican War, 1838 to 39, the UK supported Mexico and intervened to find a diplomatic solution to end the war with France in 1839. The next Franco-Mexican War, in 1861, I'm afraid to say this, but Britain was fighting on the side of France until Britain realised that the French intended to establish an empire here in Mexico and decided to withdraw its naval forces. And then in the Second World War, in 1942 from 1942 onwards, Britain and Mexico found themselves fighting shoulder to shoulder, if not in geographic proximity, at least fighting in the same war against the same enemy, because of course Mexico was one of the few forces from Latin America that employed military elements to fight against our enemies in the Second World War, most notably the 201st Fighter Squadron, the Aztec Eagles, which fought with US forces in the Pacific. And, which not many people certainly in Britain appreciate or recognise, during the 1982 Falklands conflict, or Malvinas as I think you may understand it down here, Mexico was neutral, but very, very strongly, covertly and secretly supported the United Kingdom in that conflict, for which certainly I, as a British soldier at the time, remain most grateful to Mexico. What you may not know, what not many people do know, is that Mexicans fought with the British Army in the First World War. Mexican Jews specifically fought with the British Army in the First World War as part of the Jewish Legion. And they fought among 3,000 people from different parts of the world, from the UK, from the United States, from South Africa, from Russia, from Palestine and from Argentina, as part of the Jewish Legion, which was part of the British Army. And it was actually the first Jewish fighting force in 2,000 years since the Maccabees. For those of you who don't know about the Jewish Legion, I just want to very briefly tell you this because it's an important part of the continuity of history which led to the formation and the current operations of the IDF. The Jewish Legion, as I said, was part of the British Army, and it fought with the Star of David on its shoulder. It had a menorah for its cap badge with the motto Kadima. Its regimental colours were blue and white, and its regimental march was the Hatikva. And the Jewish Legion was led through London by the band of the Coldstream Guards playing the Hatikva when it marched to Palestine in 1917 to join British forces fighting the Turks in Palestine, and fought very bravely alongside British and other Commonwealth forces at the Battle of Megiddo in 1918, which eventually resulted in the Turks being thrown out of Palestine into Syria, and it resulted in later on in the battle in Damascus before the Turks finally surrendered. Many of those people who fought in the Jewish Legion, and also people who fought in the Second World War, formed the nucleus of what became the Israel Defense Force when Israel gained independence in 1948. And their gallant actions enabled the survival of the State of Israel when she was invaded by 5 Arab armies. And that same army has been bravely and resolutely defending the country ever since. A key element of the defense of Israel in 1948 was the Hajayal volunteers, which included volunteers all the way from Mexico to fight with the fledgling IDF, as well as including 250 other volunteers from elsewhere in Latin America. Of course, as you know as well, in that conflict, people here in Mexico supported the sending of weapons and ammunition to Israel, and also fuel and other supplies which were vital to the survival of Israel in 1948, including some very, very ancient artillery pieces which were first used, I think, in the Mexican Revolutionary War, and which were initially invented in 1890 and still in use in the war in 1948, and was the Israelis' only heavy artillery they used, which came from here in Mexico. And Ben-Gurion said, without those arms, we would have been massacred, and he was referring specifically to the arms shipments which came from the United States and from Mexico to Israel in that time. Of course, even up to today, starting back then with the Jewish Legion in 1917-18, the Hajayal volunteers in 1948, and even today, as we all know, young Mexicans are serving with the IDF, bravely fighting alongside people from other countries as well as, of course, from Israel. And I would like to pay tribute to those extremely brave young men and women who go out and join the IDF. I know how difficult it is when you first decide to volunteer to join the army and fight in any army of your own nation. But for somebody who travels thousands of miles away to fight in a country with a different culture and a different language, takes immense bravery and courage, and I want to pay tribute to those young men and women and to their parents and families, perhaps some of whom are here in the audience, who support them in their struggle on behalf of the State of Israel. But when you have brave young Jewish men and women from Mexico, from the United States of America, from Great Britain, from France, from Germany, from Australia, from South Africa, when they travel from their families here in Mexico, and they travel to Israel, do they suddenly become callous, cold-blooded murderers? Do they become the kind of people who are carrying out war crimes and crimes against humanity, which the Israel Defense Force is accused of in the national and international media, in the United Nations, in the EU, and by many countries around the world? No, of course they don't. They're the same people as left here, and they're the same people as left the UK, they're the same people as left their families in Israel. So why is it that Israel faces this condemnation? Why is it that Israel is accused all around the world of contravening the laws of armed conflict? I gave evidence to the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva in the immediate aftermath of the last Gaza conflict in 2014. I've spoken at 2 emergency sessions of the Council that debated that conflict, and also the 2008-09 conflict Operation Cast Lead. And after both conflicts, the United Nations Human Rights Council condemned Israel for committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in assaults against the Palestinian civilian population. Now, the reality is not just different to the UN's findings, it is the diametric opposite. I was present during both of the last 2 Gaza conflicts. I met with those involved in the conflicts, from the Prime Minister of Israel right the way down through the cabinet, through the senior officers of the IDF, to soldiers fighting the war on the ground. I saw what they were doing, I understood their actions, I experienced the fighting effectiveness and the humanity of the IDF in action. And I told the United Nations Human Rights Council, as I told the BBC previously, that no army in history has ever made such profound efforts to prevent the loss of civilian life as has the IDF in Gaza. I want to tell you briefly about the reality of IDF morality in combat. From somebody who's not a Jew, I'm a Roman Catholic, I'm a fundamentalist Roman Catholic, perhaps ultra-Orthodox. I'm not an Israeli, I'm speaking purely with independent, objective view of somebody who's fought this kind of conflict for my entire life. And my experiences are based on, as I said, speaking and observing actions in those conflicts from the top, the very top, from the Prime Minister right down to the lowest level soldier. I know for a fact that every single meeting of Prime Minister Netanyahu's war cabinet during the war, and it met once a day and sometimes more than once a day to determine the direction of the conflict, I know for a fact that item number 1 on the agenda of that cabinet meeting was Palestinian civilian casualties. That was how important the Prime Minister of Israel and his immediate advisors felt the protection of life of innocent Palestinian civilians was number 1 on the cabinet meeting. Every cabinet meeting. The authorization of airstrikes, we've heard a little bit about it from Colonel Maxine. The sophistication of the authorization of airstrikes is unlike any army, any air force in the world. The care that's taken to ensure that the strikes are effective, yet they do not target innocent civilians, is absolutely phenomenal, and no other army in the world can replicate that, though they sometimes try. The warnings that are given, I'm not going to go into detail on every single action the IDF take to minimise the loss of civilian life, but I'm happy to discuss any specific issue further in question should you wish to do so. The warnings are incredible. No army in the world warns their enemy that they're about to attack them. They take the opposite view, they try and create surprise. But the IDF give warnings to their enemy because they know there's a high likelihood there'll be civilians there, and they want the civilians to leave, so they give them warning to go by dropping leaflets, by making phone calls, by giving radio messages, by sending text messages, and even the Israeli Defense Force has developed a specific munition which can be used to drop on the roof of a building when civilians are not leaving that building, to drop on the roof which will explode and make a loud noise but not hurt anybody, which they call knock on the roof, developed and invented by the IDF for the specific purpose of warning civilians to leave. These are not the actions of a country that wants to deliberately kill, or doesn't care if it deliberately kills innocent civilians. I want to give you 2 examples from my personal experience. The first one is, during the last Gaza conflict, I went to have a meeting at an Israeli airbase adjacent to Gaza. And I met with a group of pilots. One of them was a Scotsman, a Scots pilot serving with the IDF. We had a referendum recently about Scotland. Scotland had a referendum whether they should stay part of the United Kingdom. We tried to get rid of them, but they insisted on staying with us. Anyway, this Scottish pilot, he told me about a series of strikes he'd been attempting to carry out against a high-profile target in Gaza that very morning. And I think he said they attacked it something like 10 times, and each time they found there were civilians in the target area, so they aborted the strike, and eventually they cancelled the strike altogether. And I said to this pilot, didn't you find that deeply frustrating? You've been flying all morning and done nothing. He said, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. He said to me, I am a father, I'm a husband. He said, how could I face my children? How could I set an example